My name is Frank, and I am so glad that you're here. I'm one of the pastors here at CCV, and I want to again welcome you, especially if you're new, whether you're here for the first time or you're going to be catching up with this online later. I want us to start out this morning with a quick quiz, see how well you know a few things about symbols and logos. You're going to look at the screen with the person next to you, and there are going to be a bunch of logos and symbols up on that screen. I want you to talk with that person nearby and identify the 3 most recognized symbols and logos of all time around the world. 3 most recognized today. Talk with that person next to you and go. All right, let's bring it back. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, the Philadelphia Eagles logo, right? I mean, that's got to be the most recognized. Locally here, yeah, sure, locally here, but not around the world. First service, we had a group of people booing in this front right section, and I just called them right out. I said, sinners among us. We have to pray for them. This service, I didn't hear any boos, so pray for first service when we made that comment. Here's the first most recognized symbol, number 3, actually. Third most recognized symbol or logo in the world today. You ready? Any guesses what you think it is? Here we go. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. Now, soda's an important business for many families. How many of you grew up in a family where you call it soda? Because there's this, I want you to help me settle a debate in my house today. We call it soda in my house. Anybody here call it pop? Oh, more sinners. We need to pray for this service. It's not pop, it's soda. When you go to the grocery store, what does the sign for the aisle say? Thank you very much. It's soda. Remember the whole Coke controversy of the 1980s? When that new flavor came out? And there are places in the world, and I've been to about 10 or 12 different countries, where it was easier for me to find a bottle of Coke than it was to find a bottle of water. And why is Coke one of the most recognized symbols in the world today? Part of it's in their mission, and their mission statement is to refresh the entire world. The Coke CEO at one point said, I read this earlier this week, that their objective was to make there be a Coca-Cola within arm's reach of everyone on the planet. Making their product accessible is how they became one of the most recognized symbols in the world. Number 2, here's number 2, you ready? The Nike swoosh. Second most recognized symbol in all the world. Why? How did Nike become number 2 on this list? Again, it's making their product accessible. Their mission statement is as follows: to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Making their product accessible. Third one we're looking at this morning, number 1 on the list. You ready? The cross. Most recognized symbol in all the world, the number 1 spot. So is the cross accessible? Well, yeah, sure, in the most literal physical sense, absolutely. Some of you came to church this morning with crosses on your person, around your neck and your ears. Some of you have it inked into your skin, on your body. Is the cross accessible? Sure. You could find it everywhere. License plates, refrigerator magnets, bumper stickers. Somewhere, someone, somehow has put a cross on everything or turned it into a cross. Is that symbol physically accessible? Absolutely. But it goes beyond the physical object. The accessibility of the cross is in part because of what that symbol means for people spiritually, emotionally, mentally, not just in the physical object itself. And I think that often as Christians, we maybe take that a little bit for granted, what the cross represents. Not the piece of wood that's in some buildings on the stage or on a flag or around our neck in a piece of jewelry. Not the object in itself, but what it means. To illustrate this, let me ask you a question that might be difficult for some of you to do this little exercise this morning, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. I want you to think about someone right now who has hurt you. For some of you, that's maybe really fresh in your memory because that person hurt you just this last week or maybe even this morning. Maybe they took something from you. Maybe they violated your trust or let you down and disappointed you as they wronged you. Maybe they left you wanting to sing that famous country song, "All My Exes Live in Texas," but you're going to substitute Pennsylvania because you're getting ready to move. I don't know what it is for you, but usually those people, we put X's in front of their names. It could be an ex-spouse, an ex-friend, an ex-girlfriend, an ex-boyfriend, an ex-boss. Just another general ex like a coach or a teacher. Those people in your life that have hurt you and hurt me have influence over us to this very day. And they influence us to the point where we deal with them in one specific way, and that's usually by doing something that we call holding a grudge. Because holding a grudge is such a satisfying thing, isn't it? Because we think it can somehow make things just a little better because we might in some way, shape, or form hurt them, either in our current state by holding this grudge, giving them the cold shoulder, or maybe you're never even going to see them again, but you can fantasize about it. We'll fantasize about getting revenge as part of our grudge. And that fantasy will usually look something like this. Maybe you picture yourself walking through the mall, your mall of choice. And as you're walking through the mall, you see them in the distance down the way walking towards you. They don't notice you yet because they're playing with their cell phone and they're looking down at their phone, and as they're walking, all of a sudden they almost bump into you and the two of you lock eyes. And it's like time freezes in that just brief few seconds. And you all of a sudden are blessed by God with the oratory skills of Billy Graham. Except you're not going to say nice things. No, you're going to go all Real Housewives on them. Real Housewives of Montgomery County or whatever county you happen to live in. You're going off on them. You're verbally laying into them. And it just so happens that your closest family and friends happen to be at the mall with you that day. And they start gathering around, forming a circle and observing what is about to take place as you are going off on them. And they start smiling, and your smile gets bigger as this person just begins to emotionally and physically collapse under the weight of your verbal laying into them hard. And their eyes start to well up as you get to the last of it. And their lip begins to quiver. And they're about to say something, maybe even let out a bit of an apology as they get started. It's like you pause time again and in slow motion walk away. And as you do, your friends, your family, they cheer and applaud. You've done it. You've won. And somehow, in this fantasy, this grudge, we think we're better off. We think that we're going to feel better and that we're going to do better with the grudge, with the fantasy revenge. But that's not the way that grudges work. The truth is, the longer you hold on to a grudge, the longer it holds on to you. The deeper that you grip a grudge, thinking that you're going to get revenge, the deeper it grips you. And what happens, and this is why This is so unhealthy for all of us. The person who's harmed the most by all of it is you and me when we behave this way. You know what holding a grudge really is? This is what holding a grudge is. Holding a grudge is withholding forgiveness. If you're taking notes this morning, you want to write this down. Withholding a grudge is withholding forgiveness. We're wrapping up this One Thing series today. And the one thing that I think makes the biggest difference in the lives of people who say they want to follow Jesus and obey his teachings is forgiveness. It's what this cross represents for all of us. It's what the cross is all about. Forgiveness. And for some of us here this morning, maybe for you, the pain is too fresh to even consider forgiving someone who has hurt you. What I want you to know today is that at some point, I think you're going to want to consider forgiveness when you think about what it does when you hold a grudge, what it does to you. And I hope you remember today as a point at which you can refer to say, you know what, I'm ready to take that next step. See, it's the cross that makes forgiveness accessible. It's what the cross is and represents and what happened on it 2,000 years ago that makes forgiveness accessible to us all. And it's not some kind of mystical thing. It provides us with the ability to overcome and move on and to get past what happened to us, no matter how big or small. So let's start first with the cross. The cross was designed to be accessible. It was designed for us to get up close and personal with, which is a little bit contrary to what I grew up with when I think of images of the cross. First of all, when I grew up watching TVs and films that depicted the cross as this thing that was way up in the air that someone was crucified on. You could see in the image here, it's from the old 60s film Spartacus. Crucifixion, Roman crucifixion was represented, and oftentimes is, as something that happened as a spectacle that was to be witnessed from a distance. You can notice in this photo that these guys are way up in the air. The guys in front of them are on horseback, and they're still above them. Like they had to be hoisted up with pulleys and ropes in order to be crucified. That's not how Rome crucified people at all. Often we're also culturally presented with a cross that looks like a lowercase t. Again, not historically accurate. The cross is actually represented historically accurate in this way, as a capital T, and as something that was done by the Romans to be an intimate experience. Notice how low to the ground these people are being crucified, merely just 1 or 2 feet from the actual ground. Why did Rome crucify the people this way? Because they wanted the cross as a form of torture and punishment to be accessible. They wanted it to be an intimate experience. They wanted to look at you if you were there in the area at the time of someone being crucified. They want to say, hey, come here. Come, get close. I want you to smell the infected flesh as this person has been hanging here for a week outside. See and hear the tears and cries of pain as this person is suffering in agony. They wanted the experience to be up close, personal, and accessible, because they wanted anyone, whether you be a political person or another nation or a common street criminal, to look at that event and say, you know what? You want to oppose Rome or its citizens? This is what can happen to you. But the day that Christ was crucified, the day that Jesus hung on the cross, Rome wasn't the only one sending a message. God the Father was also sending a message. A message that says that you are forgiven. And forgiveness is accessible to all. God that day took a symbol that represented torture, pain, and suffering and turned it into something that represented forgiveness, hope, and peace. So if you're here today with hurts or scars, holding a grudge, maybe it's time to move on and consider forgiveness. And look at Paul's advice that we're going to look at this morning in Ephesians chapter 4. If you want to follow along with me, you can open up your app where you can search on the Google Play Store, the App Store for CCV Mobile, and you'll click on the Bible tab, and then you'll find today's passage, or if you want to open up in your own Bible, Ephesians 4:31. Paul says this, "Get rid of all bitterness." This is his advice to move on with forgiveness. "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, slander, brawling, along with every form of malice." Just get rid of it. If someone has hurt you today, you're here, someone's hurt you, and you're angry, get rid of it. You hear someone today has talked about you behind your back, you want to talk about them behind theirs? Paul says, no, get rid of it. You want to physically hurt someone because they hurt you? Paul says, no, get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's that easy. Just get rid of it. It's time to move on. Everybody got that? All right, bow your heads in prayer. Pray with me. I'm kidding. It's not that easy. Did you seriously think it's that easy for you? You were like, no one was here. That's it? Put that passage back up. Put that passage back up on the screen for me. Get rid of all bitterness. What's the first instinct that you have when you read that? When I read that, I'm like, really? That's it? Just get rid of it? I'm supposed to be... How? How do I get rid of it? I've been trying for a long time. Let me tell you, I've been hurt like you. I've had people in my life that I thought had my back and let me down. And I'm still angry. How do I get rid of it? Get rid of it. Let me get real with you just for a moment. Some of you here today, you don't want to get rid of it, and I understand. I don't necessarily want to get rid of it either. You don't want to get rid of it because you're really hurt. I know what that feels like. Some of us don't want to get rid of it because that's become our new normal. Do you know what I mean by that? Paul's describing these feelings that we have when we've been betrayed or someone has taken something from us, and we feel these feelings of rage and anger and disappointment build up inside of us, and that becomes our new normal. When we don't get rid of it and we let the grudge dig in deep and it grips us and it has hold of us and we don't get rid of it, it turns into something that stays there, and that anger and bitterness, it becomes the new normal. And then when we finally forget about it just for a little while, there's this absence of the anger and rage, and we don't feel the new normal anymore, and we've got to find some more. And some of you might be thinking, well, Frank, hang on a second, Frank. Maybe you're getting a little defensive because I'm talking about you and you know what this is like. I'm talking about me too. I've been there. But you want to say, hold on, Frank, just stop a second because you haven't heard what they did to me. Let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what they took from me. And that's why I don't want to get rid of it. And I'd say, hang on, right there. You're proving my point. You're retelling the story. The grudge has its grip on you. You don't want to let go. And I know what you mean. I understand. But there is a way to move forward. There's a way to move forward. Let's go straight, Nick, in the back there. Let's go straight forward to a couple of slides. You know what the one I'm talking about. When Paul says in Ephesians 4:32, he says this is the way forward, guys. Be kind and compassionate with one another, forgiving each other. But it doesn't just stop with forgiveness. This is where it starts. It starts with forgiveness. Because the problem with this is when you release someone with forgiveness, we're releasing them from what we feel they owe us. And it's more than that. They owe us more than what they could ever repay. Let me explain. When someone in your life has caused you pain, they've hurt you. It's like they've stolen from you. They stole my job, they stole my wife, they stole my life, they stole my friends. You know what that's like. Why would I even consider forgiving them? It doesn't make any sense. It's because forgiveness only makes sense to someone who has actually been forgiven. Forgiveness only makes sense to someone who has actually been forgiven. How do I go on forgiving them when I feel like they don't deserve it? Look at what Paul says in the rest of this verse. He says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, and here's the key as to how. How do I forgive them when I don't want to? Just as Christ forgave you. Friends, this is where we often get tripped up. When we finally get to the place as Christians where we're saying, all right, I'm ready to take that step and forgive, we often get stuck right here. How do I forgive them when I don't feel like they deserve it? How? When we finally consider forgiveness, we often get stuck on what we think they deserve. We get all tripped up right here. And I get it. But for the person who's following Jesus, forgiveness shouldn't hinge upon what we think people deserve. If that's how forgiveness worked, friends, none of us in this room would be forgiven. The cross wouldn't mean what it means to us today. I like how C.S. Lewis put it. He said, to be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable, because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. Let me illustrate how powerful this is with a true story about something that happened right here in our own backyard in Lancaster 10 years ago. It was a shooting at a little one-room schoolhouse. It was a tiny community. Let me read to you from the article. It was a tiny community that a man stormed into a one-room schoolhouse, shot 10 young girls. Any of you remember when this happened? Killed 5 of them. Then killed himself. That old school has since been demolished. A new school was closed on the day 1 year later to celebrate the anniversary of the shooting. And on that anniversary, the families met privately in prayer, and it was an Amish schoolhouse. Since the tragedy, people around the world were inspired by the way the Amish expressed their forgiveness toward the killer and his family. But while their acts of forgiveness were inspiring, they also caused a misperception that these Amish had quickly gotten over the tragedy. Charles Roberts was not Amish, but the Amish knew him as the milk truck driver who made deliveries. And it was announced very quickly that the Amish community had donated money to the killer's widow and her 3 young children. It was one more gesture of forgiveness, gestures that began right after the school shooting. Donald Craybill, who's a sociologist in the area, he said this: I think the most powerful demonstration of the depth of Amish forgiveness was when the members of the community went to the killer's burial service at the cemetery. Several families, Amish families, who had buried their daughters just the day before, were in attendance and hugged the widow and other members of the killer's family. Stephen Knoll, who's a professor of Amish studies at Elizabethtown College, said, for most people, forgiveness and acceptance come at the end of a long emotional process. But for the Amish, they forgive first and then work every day to work through the emotions of it. Friends, I think this is what Paul was getting at. Don't start with your pain and your grudge and what you think people deserve who have hurt you. Start with forgiveness and then work to move past it. Past those feelings. Past the hurts. Paul wraps up this whole idea in Ephesians 5. He says, follow God's example. As dearly loved children, walk in the way of love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. Friends, that brings us back to where we started today. The cross. That fragrant offering. The cross. Jesus loved you so much. And you may have, you and I both, we've got pain and suffering that we hold on to, bitterness and anger that we've allowed to wreak havoc in our lives and in our relationships. Not just our relationships with other people, but in our very own relationship with God. And even in the midst of that, Jesus says, I love you. So much so that I was willing to give myself on a cross. So Paul's point is this: you can be free. You can be free from that anger. You can be free from the bitterness. You can be free from the gossip and anything else that could be a form of malice that you could drum up in your imagination to do or say. And so at the end of today's service, maybe you need to make a phone call that you never intended to make. Maybe you need to talk to someone right here before you leave. Maybe you're never going to see that person again, but you know what? You can still, right here in your seat, make a decision to forgive. Because here's the bottom line. Forgiven people forgive people. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this reminder this morning of what the cross represents. Not just in its physical form, but God, in the most deep and spiritual sense, how it is all about an intimate experience with your Son where we're forgiven. Thank you for that in Jesus' name.